Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about a homeowners association that thinks they own more than they actually do. I found out my neighborhood's lake was supposedly off limits to me because I refused to join the homeowners association on a Tuesday morning while holding a chipped coffee mug and wearing slippers that had seen better days. I was standing at my back fence looking out over this beautiful little lake that had honestly been the entire reason I bought my house. I'm talking perfect glassy water in the early mornings, ducks cruising along like they own the place, kids fishing after school, the whole thing. It wasn't huge, but it was big enough to make you forget you were anywhere near traffic or strip malls. I'd closed on the house about 3 months before, after bouncing between rentals for way too long. My name's Eli, by the way. At the time, I thought I had finally beaten the system. I'd found a house next to a lake in an area that wasn't insanely priced, and according to the listing agent, there was no mandatory HOA. That last part was important. I've rented in places with HOAs before. I'm not anti-rule. I get why they exist. But I've also watched some people treat a little bit of authority like a winning lottery ticket. I didn't want to spend my free time arguing over mailbox colors or getting warnings about my trash can being visible for 11 minutes longer than it should be. So when the agent said, no mandatory HOA, just a voluntary neighborhood association, I practically heard a choir of angels. The first hint that I might have misunderstood came about a week after I moved in. A thick folder got taped to my front door. On the front of it was a sticker with a logo, a seagull-looking bird, and some waves with the words Lakeview Commons Owners Circle arched around it. Not exactly intimidating, so I opened it. Inside, rules. So many rules. 8 pages of them. And an application form, and a payment slip for annual assessment mandatory for all lake-accessible properties. I remember reading that phrase 3 times. My property wasn't lake-accessible. There was a city-owned walking path running between my back fence and the lake. That was in all the public listings. It was part of why I felt safe buying it. I didn't want to be on the hook for shoreline maintenance and whatever else. I called the number at the bottom of the sheet. A woman answered with a level of enthusiasm I normally only hear from people greeting toddlers or new clients. Lakeview Commons Owners Circle, this is Maribel. Hi, yeah, my name's Eli. I think I got this HOA packet by mistake. I just moved into the brick ranch on Willow Creek. My deed doesn't mention any HOA, and there's a public trail between my yard and the lake, so I'm not sure. She cut me off so smoothly it was almost impressive. Oh, you're the new owner next to the brown deck, right? Welcome, no mistake, all of us around the lake are part of the association. It's for the good of the neighborhood. Okay, but I was told it was voluntary, I said. And my title paperwork doesn't show any covenants or anything. There was a tiny pause and her voice dropped from bubbly to just firm. Well, it is voluntary in a general sense, but we've decided that anyone who wants to use the lake, or even benefit from the view of it, yes, she really said that, needs to be a member in good standing. Our bylaws are very clear. I laughed, not because I thought it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept that last sentence. I'm sorry. Did you say even benefit from the view of it? Yes, she repeated. We spend a lot of money maintaining the shoreline, the fountains, the fish, the trail. If you're going to enjoy that, you need to contribute your fair share. It's only $250 a year and a one-time initiation fee of $500. And we really prefer if people pay the full year up front. That sounds like the definition of not voluntary, I said. Look, I'm not trying to be difficult, but if it's not on my deed, you can't just decide I'm in an HOA, and the trail behind my house is city property. The realtor checked that, I checked that. If you want to discuss the legal aspects, she said, with that tone people get when they think they're pulling out a trump card, you can take it up with our president. His name is Rowan. He also happens to be an attorney. I'll have him stop by. Uh-huh, I said. Okay, sure, have him bring whatever legal documents he has. Thanks. I hung up thinking it would be a mildly annoying conversation, maybe a stupid standoff where I had to keep declining an invitation to join their little lake club. I did not expect it to unravel into calls to 911, code enforcement lawyers, and what my brother later referred to as the pettiest avalanche of consequences I've ever seen. The first time I met Rowan, he was already on my property. I walked out back to clean up some fallen branches along the fence line and heard voices on the other side. The trail had a low chain and a little public access sign at either end, and people walked it all the time. I didn't think anything of it until I stepped onto my deck and saw a man in a polo shirt and khakis standing practically pressed up against my fence, pointing into my yard like he was giving a lecture. Two women stood on the trail with clipboards, looking where he pointed and nodding. "Can I help you?" I called. He turned, squinted like the sun had personally offended him, and then plastered on this professional smile. You must be Eli. I'm Rowan, the association president." He said it the way someone else might say, "I'm the chief of surgery." "Cool," I said. "So, not to be weird, but why are you inspecting my weeds?" He gave a little chuckle, then gestured to the women. "This is our compliance team, Poppy and Denise. We're just doing a courtesy walkthrough. We like to keep the properties that border the lake up to a certain standard for everyone's enjoyment. That includes fencing, landscaping, outdoor structures." "I'm not in your association," I said, cutting him off before he could give me the full timeshare pitch. "And this is my yard, not a common area. Whatever standards you have don't apply to me." His smile didn't move, but something in his eyes did. "You live on the lake, Eli. That's not just your concern. It affects all the neighbors." "I live near the lake," I corrected, pointing past him to the trail. "Huge difference. And the city owns that, not your HOA. That's all on public record." Rowan shifted his weight, clearly not used to being challenged on basic facts. "We maintain the trail. We pick up trash. We repair the benches. We plant the trees. The city has no budget for that. We're providing a service, so we have a say. And as for your membership, the association has rules about people in this section. We need everyone to contribute. Otherwise, it isn't fair." "I get that you want help paying for stuff," I said. "But you can't just decide I'm in your group. My paperwork is clear. I'm not subject to any covenants." Poppy, who looked like she'd be more comfortable leading a school fundraiser than a property inspection, piped up. "Well, we did vote that all properties with lake access or lake view are automatically considered associated properties. It was unanimous." "That's not how law works," I said. "That's how picking toppings on a pizza works. You can vote to fund the trail, sure. You can't vote me into a contract I never signed." Rowan's smile slipped exactly 1 millimeter. "Look, you're new here. I get it. Maybe your realtor didn't explain the expectations. But if you just sign the paperwork, we could waive part of your initiation fee as a welcome gesture, and then all of this goes away." "No," I said simply. "I'm not joining. And until you show me something filed with the county that says otherwise, we're done here." For a second, I thought he was going to argue more. Instead, he took a breath like he was inhaling a whole new personality and smiled again. "All right, we'll be in touch. Just remember, the lake and the land around it," he gestured broadly, taking in the trail, the trees, the glinting water, "belongs to the association. Use of it is limited to members in good standing, including visual enjoyment." I honestly thought I misheard him. "Visual enjoyment?" "You heard me," he said. "You don't get to benefit from the view without contributing. We have lawyers." I looked at him, then at the lake, then back at him. "You think you can stop me from looking at the lake? We'll be in touch," he repeated and walked away. I told my brother about it that night on the phone. He did what older brothers do and immediately made it a joke. "So what, are they going to put blinders on your windows?" he asked. "Do they send someone over every morning to tape a paper bag over your face when you step outside?" "I don't know, man," I said. "It's weird. But I'm not paying them just because they think they own photons that bounce off water. If I had realized how literally they meant that, I might have started keeping a log from day one." The next few weeks, I noticed more and more people on the trail watching my yard. Not in a "hey neighbor" kind of way, in a zoning inspector with a checklist kind of way. Whenever I was out back, someone from the association seemed to magically appear. They'd walk slowly past, sometimes even stopping at the exact middle of my lot to look out at the lake. But their eyes were clearly going back and forth between me and my fence line. One Sunday afternoon, I had my sister's kids over. I set up a little inflatable pool on the patio and a cheap plastic water table. The lake looked amazing, but I didn't want to deal with getting a bunch of kids into life jackets, plus I still wasn't sure what the association's deal was. So we stayed inside my fence. We'd been out there maybe 20 minutes when a woman I didn't recognize walked right up to my back fence from the trail and raised her phone like she was filming. "Excuse me?" I said. She didn't lower the phone. "Confirming unlawful use," she said, as if I'd asked what she was doing. "Unlawful what?" I walked closer, just short of the fence. The kids were splashing, oblivious. "You're using the lake amenities," she said matter-of-factly. "We voted that this entire area is a lake amenity zone. That includes the view and the breeze and the aesthetic. You're using all that without being a member. I need documentation." I took a breath and counted to 5 because I did not want to lose my calm in front of my niece and nephews. "Are you serious right now?" She finally lowered the phone enough that I could see her face. Late 50s visor association logo on her polo. "You were warned," she said. "I'm on the board. We have a duty to enforce the bylaws, or they mean nothing." "Your bylaws don't apply to me," I said. "Now please stop recording my nieces and nephews." "You're welcome to blur them," she said. "This is about you and your illegal benefit." That phrase stuck in my head, illegal benefit. Like I'd snuck into a movie without paying and somehow dragged a whole landscape with me. I walked back over to the patio on my side and waved my sister over. "Hey, we're gonna go inside for a bit," I told her quietly, explaining what just happened while the kids toweled off. My sister is not as conflict avoidant as I am. She walked right back out to the fence, lifted her not-so-tiny mom voice, and told the woman to cut it out or she'd call the police for harassment. The board member huffed about public right-of-way and documentary evidence, then finally stomped off. After they left, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and finally did what I should have done earlier. I pulled up the county's property maps, zoning records, and any documents attached to the lake parcel. What I found made me go from mildly annoyed to genuinely furious. The lake and the strip of land around it, including the trail, were owned by what was basically a local water management district. There was a recorded easement giving all members of the public the right to use the shoreline, trail, and lake surface for recreation. The only restrictions were the obvious ones. No motorized boats, no littering, no swimming near the intake valve, stuff like that. There was zero mention of any homeowners association having special rights. The only place Lakeview Commons Owners Circle showed up was in a maintenance agreement, and even that just said they volunteered to mow, plant, and clean in exchange for being allowed to put up their little logo signs. That was it. They were glorified volunteers. I printed everything. The easement language, the parcel ownership, the maintenance agreement. I highlighted parts, sticky noted pages, the whole 9 yards. The next day, there was another envelope in my mailbox. Hand-delivered, not mailed. It was from Lakeview Commons Owners Circle Compliance Division, and it was labeled Final Notice. It said in summary, I had 30 days to join the association and pay all fees, or my use of lake amenities would be revoked, and I was prohibited from facing, viewing, or orienting any personal use area or structure toward the lake, and any violation would result in escalating fines, collection actions, and involvement of local law enforcement. My favorite line was this gem. This includes but is not limited to gazing, looking, sitting, or standing in such a way that indicates visual enjoyment of the Lakeview Commons Lake. They literally invented a thought crime. There was also a handwritten note at the bottom from Rowan. We really don't want this to be adversarial. Please come to the next meeting and sign your membership form. This is how we keep the neighborhood special. I took the entire packet, put it in a folder with my printed county documents, and labeled the tab HOA Nonsense. I dropped it on my kitchen counter and for about 12 hours tried to ignore it. Then they called 911 on me. It was a Wednesday, late afternoon, the kind of day where the sun slants low and turns everything gold. I was sitting in one of those cheap folding camp chairs on my tiny concrete patio, a book in one hand and a cold drink in the other. I wasn't playing music, I wasn't being loud. The back door was open so I could hear my dishwasher chugging away inside. Every so often, I'd look up from my book and watch the light rippling on the lake. I wasn't even thinking about the association. It had been a long day at work. I just wanted 30 minutes of peace. About 15 minutes in, I noticed a man power walking down the trail. He had that HOA board member outfit. Visor, polo shirt with the logo, shorts, sneakers. He slowed down when he got to my yard and actually stopped. Just stood there looking at me. I pretended to ignore him. I was not in the mood. Then he pulled out his phone. I assumed he was going to start recording me, so I steeled myself. Instead, I heard him say, "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser and a disturbance on private association property." My head snapped up so fast I almost spilled my drink. "No," he continued. "He's sitting in his backyard, but he's facing our lake and clearly using it without authorization. Yes, we have documentation that we own the shoreline. Yes, he's refusing to comply." I stood up, heart pounding, and walked over to the fence. "Who are you calling?" I asked, even though I already knew. He held up a finger like I was a talkative toddler. "Yes, that's right," he repeated into the phone. He's been harassing board members and using the lake after being told his privileges are revoked. We've warned him verbally and in writing. We're just concerned it's going to escalate." "You're calling 911 because I'm looking at water?" I said, incredulous. He turned his back slightly so I was out of his immediate line of sight, but his voice carried. "Yes, he's approaching me now in an aggressive manner," he said. I was standing 3 feet back from my own fence, barefoot, holding a paperback and a plastic cup. That's when it clicked. He wasn't just being dramatic, he was trying to create a record. Aggressive, harassing, trespasser, all the magic words that could make me sound like a problem instead of just some guy who didn't want to join their club. I did the only thing I could think of that would protect me. I pulled out my own phone and hit record. "Hi," I said loudly enough for both the man and my microphone. "Just so we're clear, I'm standing in my backyard, behind my own fence, sitting in a chair that is in no way on your property. You are on a public trail that is owned by the Water District. I've already confirmed that with the county. I have not threatened you, and if you're telling the police otherwise, you're making a false report." He glanced back at me, eyes narrowed. Into the phone, he said, "He's shouting now. I feel unsafe. Please send someone quickly." I honestly thought the dispatcher would see through it. I figured they'd tell him it was a civil issue, or at worst send a car to roll by, see that it was nothing, and move on. I underestimated how seriously they take a call that includes the words, "I feel unsafe." 10 minutes later, I heard sirens. They got louder and closer. And then 2 patrol cars turned onto the street behind my house. My stomach dropped. I put my book down carefully on the chair, took another breath, and told myself over and over again, "You've done nothing wrong. You are on your property. You have it all on video. Do not freak out." I walked around to the front yard to meet them, hoping like crazy this wasn't about to go very badly, very quickly. I walked around the side of my house to the front yard, trying to make my hands look less like they wanted to shake. 2 patrol cars idled at the curb. One officer was standing in the street talking to a guy in a visor and polo. It took me half a second to recognize him as the same guy from the trail, only now he was in full performance mode, gesturing toward my yard, looking distressed, doing that rapid talking thing people do when they want to control the narrative. The second officer was just stepping out of his car when he saw me. He was mid-40s, calm-looking, hand resting near his belt, but not on his weapon. That alone made my heart rate come down a notch. "Afternoon," he said, walking up my driveway. "You Eli?" "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm the one on the property, yeah." "Okay." He glanced past me toward the backyard, then back at his partner, then back at me. "We got a call about a trespass and disturbance behind the houses. Why don't you tell me what's going on from your side?" I pointed at my driveway. "Do you mind if we talk up here, away from whatever story he's telling?" The corner of his mouth twitched like he wanted to smile. "That's fine." So I laid it out. How I'd bought the house with a public trail behind it. How the HOA had decided on its own that the lake and the land around it belonged to them. How they were trying to force me into joining even though I had no HOA in my deed. How they sent me letters saying I wasn't allowed to visually enjoy the lake. How I'd been sitting in my own backyard with a book when Visor Guy walked up and called 911. "Oh, and just so you know," I added, pulling out my phone, I recorded the part where he said I was approaching him aggressively while I was barefoot in my yard 10 feet away, holding a paperback. The officer, his name tag said Harris, gave a slow nod. "You mind if I see that?" I pulled up the clip and handed the phone over. He listened, expression neutral. I watched his eyebrows get ever so slightly closer together when Visor Guy said, "I feel unsafe," and I was just standing there. After about 30 seconds, Officer Harris stopped the video and handed the phone back. "Okay, I appreciate you being calm and cooperative," he said. "I'm going to go talk to them again. Just hang out here for a minute, all right?" "Can I grab my folder?" I asked. "I have the county records that show the lake is public and the trail is an easement." He looked genuinely relieved. "If you have that, yes, please." I ducked inside, grabbed the HOA nonsense folder off my counter, and came back out. My heart had settled into this weird, steady thump, like my body had realized this was going to be a long process and decided to pace itself. By the time I got back to the driveway, Harris's partner, young, buzz-cut, built like he actually did the workouts everyone else pretends to do, had joined the conversation with Visor Guy. They all turned when Officer Harris waved me over. "Okay," he said evenly. "So Mr. Darrell here is saying the trail and lake are private association property and that you've been told not to use them." "That's not accurate," I said. and his association doesn't own that property. Daryl sucked in a breath like I'd just insulted his ancestors. "We have bylaws," he snapped. "We voted years ago that the shoreline and all associated amenities belong." "Property ownership doesn't happen by vote," Officer Harris cut in. His tone stayed mild, but there was steel under it. "It happens by deed and record. Do you have any documents that show your association holds title to that parcel?" Daryl actually seemed thrown by the question. We have a maintenance agreement. We've always treated it as association property." "That's not the same thing," I said, opening my folder. "Here." I pulled out the map I'd printed with the parcel highlighted and the ownership listed as the Water Management District. "This is from the county property appraiser, and this," I flipped to another page, "is the easement language. It specifically says for the use and enjoyment of all members of the public. No mention of any HOA having special rights or the ability to restrict access." I handed the pages to Harris, and for a second the whole group was quiet except for the hum of the patrol car engines. Harris read. His partner leaned in over his shoulder. Daryl craned his neck, trying to see, but Harris tilted the pages away just enough that he couldn't. After a long moment, Harris looked up at Daryl. "You said on the phone this was private association property. You told dispatch there was a trespasser." "It is private," Daryl insisted. "We pay for the fountains, the fish, the landscaping. We've always treated it as ours. He's benefiting from our amenities without paying. He's been harassing board members. He's refused to comply with our notices. I haven't stepped foot on the trail since this started," I said. "I was inside my fence, on my property, reading a book." "Facing the lake," Daryl said like that was some kind of confession. "We revoked his lake privileges." I almost laughed. "You can't revoke my right to look at something that's not yours." Buzzcut Officer coughed in a way that sounded suspiciously like a half-smothered chuckle. Officer Harris folded the papers and tapped them lightly against his hand. "All right, here's what we're not going to do," he said, looking at Daryl. "We're not going to use 911 to settle disputes over who's allowed to look at the lake. Emergency lines are for emergencies. Someone sitting in their yard reading a book is not an emergency." Daryl's face went red. "He's been warned we own that land. He's refusing to acknowledge." "You don't own it," Harris said flatly. He held up the papers. "The county records don't lie. If you've got something that contradicts this, you're welcome to bring it down to the station, and we'll attach it to the report. But as of right now, I see no evidence this man is trespassing. And I do see evidence you made materially false statements to dispatch." That last phrase hit Daryl like a slap. "Are you accusing me of lying?" "I'm telling you," Harris said, "that saying we own this property when you do not, and saying someone is trespassing when they're on their own lot, is a problem. Misuse of 911 is a chargeable offense in this state. I'm not arresting you today, but this is going to be in our system. If there are any more calls like this, we're not going to be so patient." You could almost see Daryl's brain recalibrating. The confident HOA board swagger had drained out of him. He looked for the first time like a regular guy who just realized he'd pushed something too far. "So what, he can just sit there?" Daryl demanded weakly. "And stare at our lake?" "It's not your lake," I said. I couldn't help it. Harris ignored that. "He can sit in his yard and look at whatever he wants, as long as he's not breaking any laws or disturbing anyone. Just like you can walk the trail, as long as you're not harassing homeowners." The word harassing landed heavy. "We're done here," Harris said with that tone that means discussion is over. "Mr. Daryl, I suggest you talk to an actual real estate attorney or the city about what your association's authority is and isn't. But do not call 911 about this again unless there is an actual threat to life or property. Understood?" Daryl muttered something that technically sounded like yes. Harris turned to me. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. My hands had stopped shaking. "Thank you for listening. And, if I want to file a complaint about being falsely reported, how do I do that?" He didn't look surprised. "You can come down to the station or use the online form. Reference this incident number." He scribbled something on the back of his card and handed it to me. Then, because he was clearly a person who dealt with neighborhood drama before, he added quietly, "Keep your video, keep your paperwork, and if they bother you again, document everything." They left. The patrol cars rolled away. The street went back to its usual quiet. But something had shifted. Up until then, the HOA had been this vague, annoying force. Now it had crossed a line. It tried to use the police to scare me into compliance. It lied about owning public land. It played games with words like trespass and unsafe that, in a different context, could have gone really badly for me. So I stopped trying to just be the reasonable neighbor and started being the guy who keeps receipts. That night, I filled out the online complaint about the false report. I uploaded my video with timestamps. I included copies of the county documents. I was polite, straightforward, and very detailed. Then I took that same packet and sent versions of it to 3 places. The Water Management District that technically owned the lake, the city's Parks and Recreation Department, they oversaw public trails, the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, which had a nice little category for misrepresentation by neighborhood associations. Each email said basically the same thing. Here are people claiming exclusive ownership of public land, threatening residents, and trying to prevent public use. Here is how they're doing it. Here are their letters. Here is the easement that says they're wrong. And I hit send and went to bed. And within a week, the ripples started. The first one came in the form of a knock on my door on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened it to find a woman in khakis and a polo that said Water Resources District, and a man in a city badge lanyard. "Hi," the woman said, "are you Eli?" "Yes," I said, already feeling that strange combination of dread and excitement that comes when bureaucracy responds to you faster than expected. "I'm Talia with the district. This is Joel from the city. We got your complaint about the lake access. Mind if we ask you a few questions and look at the trail behind your house?" "Please do," I said. "I have everything printed out if you need it." They actually laughed at that, like I'd said the magic phrase. We walked out back together. I opened my gate to let them onto the trail. It was weird being on the other side of my own fence with officials in tow, but it felt safe with them there. Immediately, they started taking pictures, not of my yard, but of the signs. There were more than I'd even really noticed before because they'd been there since I moved in. Private HOA lake, members only. No trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. Association property used by permit only. Each one had the Lakeview logo and some official-sounding language. Talia took pictures of every sign. Joel took notes. "These are absolutely not authorized," she said. "We don't give private associations the right to post no trespassing signs on district land. The whole point of the easement is that it's public. Can they even threaten prosecution?" I asked. "No," Joel said flatly. "Only the city or district can do that. And certainly not for simply being present on a public path. This is a problem." They walked down the trail, checking the shoreline. That's when I saw their faces change. About halfway along the curve of the lake, just past where my property line ended, the HOA had built a gazebo. I'd noticed it before, of course. A wooden structure with a little metal roof, a reserved for association events plaque, and some tasteful string lights. But I'd never thought about exactly where it sat. Talia paced off the distance from the trail to the gazebo, then checked something on her tablet. "Yeah," she said slowly. "This is on our side of the line." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, "that someone built a permanent structure on public land over a managed water resource without permission, permits, or inspection." She pointed to the edge of the gazebo where a set of stairs led down to a small floating dock. "And that's a dock on our reservoir that we definitely didn't approve." I might be petty, but I'm not so petty that I didn't feel at least a little bad for what I knew was about to land on the HOA. But that sympathy was deeply buried under several layers of, "You shouldn't have tried to weaponize the police over my eyeballs." "Did they tell you they had permits?" I asked. "We never got an application," Talia said. "I'm going to double check in the office, but no, I'd have seen it." Joel shook his head. "We've had issues with neighborhood groups assuming we mow it so we own it before, but this is next level." Over the next few weeks, it felt like the neighborhood turned into a low-budget civic drama series. First, a letter went out from the water district to every homeowner around the lake. I know because one showed up in my mailbox even though I wasn't in the HOA. It said in very polite government language, "The lake and surrounding land are public. Any signage indicating otherwise is unauthorized and must be removed. Any future signage or construction on district property must be approved in writing." The district had not granted exclusive rights to any association, and any representation to that effect was false. There was also a line that made me snort laugh. "No individual or entity has the authority to restrict members of the public from visually observing the lake from adjacent properties or public areas." Someone in that office had a sense of humor. 2 days after that letter, a crew from the district showed up with bolt cutters and a pickup truck. I watched from my deck as they walked the trail. unscrewed and yanked up every private HOA and members-only sign, and loaded them into the truck bed. By that afternoon, the trail looked naked. Just a simple path around a simple lake, like it should have been all along. The gazebo and dock, though, that was a bigger beast. The district gave the HOA 30 days to either apply for retroactive permits and engineering review, with no guarantee of approval, or remove the structures entirely at their own expense. It also threatened daily fines if they failed to comply. You didn't have to be inside the HOA to know they were panicking. Panic has a particular flavor in a neighborhood. Whispered conversations on driveways, extra cars parked near one house, more frequent group texts pinging phones at odd hours. I got my window into it through a neighbor named Fallon. I met her when she caught me one evening taping a laminated copy of the public easement to the inside of my back fence, facing the trail. "Those are going to drive Rowan nuts," she said, laughing from the other side of the fence. I nearly jumped. "Sorry, I didn't see you." "It's okay," she said. "I've been watching the sign removal show, front row seats." She jerked her head, and a cascade of curls bounced free from her messy bun. "I'm Fallon, 2 houses down from the gazebo of doom, and unfortunately, I am in the HOA. "Unfortunately?" I asked. Fallon and I traded numbers, and she became my unofficial HOA newsfeed. She sent screenshots of bored emails melting down about lake issues, and I passed her every reply from the city, the water district, and the police. My 911 complaint didn't vanish. A sergeant called, watched my video, and said they'd formally warned Rowan about misusing 911 and might press charges if he did it again. About a month after the water district crews ripped out all the private HOA signs, the association called an emergency lake meeting. Fallon told me to show up. The clubhouse was packed. Rowan sat at a folding table with a microphone, blaming bureaucrats, talking about historical rights, and calling me one disgruntled non-member. Then people started asking questions he couldn't talk over. A woman up front asked if the district really owned the land. A grandfather asked why he'd been fined for letting his grandson fish from a shoreline the HOA never owned. When he said he wanted his money back, the room actually clapped. Fallon stood and calmly connected the dots. No vote on the dock, no vote on the gazebo, no vote on the threatening signs. Just years of "we have to" and "it's already decided." Someone in the back asked if they could recall the board. The bylaws said yes. By the time the meeting ended, there was a recall petition on the back table and a steady line of people signing it. Outside, Rowan tried one last intimidation attempt, throwing around words like defamation and interference, and reminding me again that he was a lawyer. I told him about our state's anti-slap laws, my attorney friend, and the complaint I'd filed with the bar over him lying to the police about who owned the lake. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't have a comeback. He just glared and walked away. Over the next few months, everything finally snapped into place. District engineers ruled the gazebo and dock unsafe and unpermitted. The HOA couldn't afford to fix them, so they paid to have them torn out. The recall went through, Rowan and his allies were voted off, and a calmer board took over, refunded the bogus lake trespass fines, and put in writing that the lake and trail are public. Now the trail is just a trail again. Families fish, kids take photos, runners loop around at sunrise. I sit on my patio with my chair pointed straight at the water, coffee in hand, easement laminated on my fence like a tiny shield. When new neighbors ask if they're really allowed to use the lake, I show them the paperwork. The HOA once tried to control the lake, the shoreline, even the direction of my lawn chair. In the end, they lost their illegal structures, their fake authority, and their president. I kept my house, my view, and my right to enjoy public property in peace, and that's all I ever wanted. Friends, thank you. See you soon.